Everybody, how's it going? Welcome to at least a portion of Lab 3 where we're going to make a little cube move left and right when you tilt your controller, and also, by controller I mean phone, and jump when you tap. I'm calling it Jumpy Cube or something, who knows. It'll be leveraging some of my old project just so that I can talk about other topics. You can start fresh, you can use the old project that you did for Lab 2. Either way. So, as a kind of preview for what's going to happen in the first bit, I got my controller, and when I lean it left and right, it makes the character go left and right. Then I tap, and he jumps around. Very basic movement. I could see making a game out of it. Not sure what it would be. But we'll do that over the course of these labs, I guess, as I teach stuff. I can pop on my options. You'll notice I can still move and stuff in the background, which is not optimal. But we'll fix that eventually. I can close my screen. And yeah, that's about it. Let's talk about how I made that happen. So again, I'm using Unity Remote to quickly kind of relay it to my phone, even though it's not actually built to the phone. I actually did just get a handy dandy Nokia 4.2 for like $100, so I will be stepping through the Android build process at some point, maybe in the lecture next week, just to kind of make sure that everybody's on the same page about that. But let's talk about how I got Jumpy Cube here to move. So the first thing we have, and I'll try to provide all this stuff for everybody, but if we want him to jump, we need there to be animations, or we could have, there's a thousand different ways to do it. Some would just add a rigid body is how you do physics in Unity, or a rigid body 2D, depending on if you're doing the 2D or 3D mode. I don't care which one you use. You have a rigid body and you tell it to get force applied to it up, and it'll just kind of do that automatically using the physics logic. So you just say add force up by 100 units, and it'll do that, you know. But I wanted to mess around, maybe give you an option in case you're doing more complicated characters. So I went an animation route. The animation route means that I have an animator attached to my character. I right-click, create animation controller, right there. And then I dragged it onto my object right there. Boom. So add component animator. And animator takes in an animation controller, an animator controller. And an animator controller runs through a series of animations. So when I open up animator controller, it's down here. And animator controller, middle click moves around. Animator controller will, from an entry point, I don't know how much you've worked with animations in Unity, it's kind of a logic tree of how to go from one animation to the next. So usually you would right click in here, create animation, and I did it twice. I first made an idle animation, and then I made a jump animation. The idle animation is a just a basic, I could probably make it cute. Maybe I will make it cute. The idle animation, I'm just clicking through here, making sure I'm not crazy. Oh, it would appear that I mislabeled my animations. Okay, I was curious about some things, and this explains it. Okay, so let's delete these. Boom, boom. I'm going to name this to Jump Anim, and this one to Idle Anim because I had my name swapped. And the way that you keyframe an animation is, in your project, as I showed, you right-click, create animation. Animation, there it is. I did it twice, I ended up with these two things. I just drag them right in here, and boom, now they're here. When you drag one in for the first time, it will automatically make a connection from entry to it. I already know that I don't want that. I want to make a transition here. and then delete. Can I delete that easily? I've never actually tried to delete the default animation. Let me just make sure. Is there a checkbox? Default entry animation. If I delete this, boom, that made this one the default. Okay, cool. So now I have to switch my names around. So I'm going to call it anim_jump. Or excuse me, anim_idle. The reason being is I did the jump animation on my idle named animation, and that's why I was getting some weird behavior. But now I know. So anim_jump. So now I already have my idle in here. It plays automatically. I drag in my jump. And when do I want jump to play? I want jump to play when a certain condition is true. That is when I tap the screen. So I'll make a transition. Boom. And let's look at options we have. So how do you make a transition? You can make a transition in a few ways. I wish my screen was a little bigger, but it's not. So here's your conditions. You have a list of conditions that are based on, parameters or layers, but usually parameters. Yeah, parameters. It's always the parameters. And you have a few options. A float is, a number with a decimal place. Oftentimes you would represent speed. So if speed is 0 to 1, then do a walking animation. If it's 1 to 2, do a jog. If it's 2 to 3, do a run. Whatever that may be. An integer, maybe that's hand position. So if you are 1, then do a point. If you're 2, do a thumbs up. I don't know. But there are different situations in which you might want to use different types of variables for your animations to need to transition from one to the other. But by the way, when you do a float one and you're blending between different animations, those are called animation blend spaces, where you actually get to have like from left to right, 0 to whatever number is your max, and then you actually put the animation names in like a scale so that it can cleanly blend between all of them. But I know that I just want to tell it to do it and it to just happen. So I made a trigger. That trigger is called jump, and the second that it's true, it just plays the animation. Just fetching a quick sip of tea. All right, so when jump is true, or when jump happens, I want to go to the jump animation. I should note the difference between Boolean and trigger, because they're both kind of true-false situations. Boolean is always just two options, true or false, but it stays. A trigger, it gets turned true for a frame and then turns back off. So I don't want to have to tell it to turn on and then turn off. It's weird. So I set it up to be a trigger, so I just say jump, and he goes, aye, aye, Captain, and he does it. So boom, I want a condition. I'm going to jump, and that's it. And then after he's done his jump, he's going to go back to idle. So I right-click, make a transition, and I go from one to the other. One has a condition of jump, and the other one does not have a condition because it should just transition when the animation completes. I believe that's the has exit time thing where you can specify the blend from one to the other. And I kind of want it to happen right away. Let me just leave it like this. We'll see what it looks like after it does it. This is the blend between one animation and the next. I believe I want there to be no blend to the jump because I just want it to jump. It needs to feel snappy. But we'll see how it feels at first. So we have that animation set up, and then I added a script to touch controller. I just made an empty game object, and I called it touch controller. Why didn't I put it right on the cube? Because what if What if I use the touch controller for many things? I don't know what else I'd use it for at the moment. Maybe to like drag shapes, who knows? But the touch controller is different from the cube player. But since they're all a part of the player, maybe I would create an empty game object. Make sure it's at 0. I'll name it player, because everything about the player is going to be in here. And I'll put the touch controller, I'll call it player cube root, which has a cube inside of it. And the game manager is not really a part of the player, so I'll leave that out. The player is like just things that the player controls. He doesn't really control the game management. The game management just deals with stuff. I don't even have a script on it yet. I just know I'll need it down the line. Okay, so we have touch controller and player cube root. Remember, the player cube root is what has the animator on it, and the cube is inside of it. I'll talk about why later, but I want to first mention how we get that guy moving. So I created a script called touch controller. I believe it's in scripts. I probably would have put it in gameplay. Oh, I'm a liar. Where'd I put it? Oh, I called it player movement. Okay. In touch controller, I have a script called player movement. I don't know why I didn't name it touch controller. And you can name it whatever you want. Its primary goal is when a tap is heard, it will tell the player controller, the animator, to jump. So that script is on here, and let's look at how it works. I believe basically all I do is when it tilts, go in a direction, and when you tap, then fire off. I have a reference public transform, and I have a reference to the cube's transform, and I have a reference to the cube's animator. And then I have an arbitrary speed that I can change depending on what I want. The speed influences how fast he moves when I tilt. So there are two general behaviors. There is the jumping behavior, which is here, and there's the movement behavior, like the sliding left and right. I'll talk a little bit about the sliding later. I just want to talk about the jump for now. I have a method called shouldJump that I define down here, and it returns, remember I mentioned a Boolean is true, false. So this thing will return either true if it gets a signal from the player that it should jump, or false if it hasn't yet. So I say if my input.touches, which is all the possible touches that could be on the screen at one time, it goes between, I think, 0 and 10 on an iPhone. I believe an iPhone supports up to 10 fingers. I just say, hey, if there are any fingers currently on the screen, then if I'm only listening to the first tap, I'm not listening to the second, third, or fourth, or whatever after that. So I say, okay, if my first touch, which is touch 0, because when we go through a collection of things in code, the first element is the 0 element. I know it's weird. And actually, some programming languages start with 1. Also weird. But in C#, 0 always means the first thing. So of all my touches, take the first one that it detected, in case you did that. Take the first one that was detected, and if that touch just began, so if I just, boop, it's not when I'm holding it down, it's not when I release, it's only right when it starts, then that's when I should return true. In any other situation, I return false. Once you return a Boolean value, it breaks out, so it will never get to this if this already happened. Okay, so if shouldJump did return true, then I get the animator that I'm referenced to, and I tell it to jump. I set trigger jump. Jump, I gave it the name jump right here. I could call it anything I want, but I called it jump. So, regarding that animation, I guess there's a few things I should make sure that I mention. So since I made all those variables public up here, they appear up here. You can also do that serialized field that happened in cat-like coding. If you don't want these things to be totally public to anybody, like any code could reference it, but I'm not too concerned about that since I'm the only developer on this. I made them all public, and then I dragged in the player controller, the root into the player transform, because that's what I'm going to be moving left and right. And then the animator is from the cube itself, not from the parent player cube root. Or excuse me, other way around. It's from the cube root, not from the cube. And I'll talk about why right now. So if I click on cube root, as I mentioned, that has the animator, the cube does not. And that's because when you want to animate, I'll start animating my jump here. So since I dragged in my animation jump into here, that just automatically made this node with a reference to the animation. If I were to create a state, and then I click on it, and then it needs an animation, and I drag jump in it, and then boom. That's the slow way of doing it, and then I would have to rename it too. The fast way is I dragged this in, and boom. But to get to this quickly, I could just click on it there, or I'd click on this, and then I would double click on this, and then, there it is. Even if I was somewhere else, I click on it, and it just jumps right to it. That's why I usually have this animator open. And I want to animate my character. So I believe I double click it. There it is. And I see some keyframes on it that I already added. And to animate in Unity, you need to be clicked on the object that you're animating. So this is the thing with the animator on it. And now I can go to jump, and I can slide around, right? So I just made it have some squash and stretch. As it gets to the top, he squishes, whoop, and as he falls, he also squishes down. So he stretches out as he's going up, and he stretches a little bit as he's going down. I always like squash and stretch. So animation occurs hierarchically. So I had to have the animator on this parent. Did I turn that off? I wonder why I did that. I had to have the animator on the parent so that I could move the cube under it and get those keyframes. So you could hit the record button. I could also right click and I believe there is a quick way to, do I right click position and then add key? I prefer not doing the record button and doing everything live. It's just personal preference. Like for example, I noticed when he squeezes down up there, this little cube boy should actually stay at his highest most point. So this is a little low. So I'm gonna move this up and then right click, add key, update key, boom. So now, a little more even, a little more. Update key. And then now you might be moving them down a little fast. Let's just watch it. I'm gonna hit play. When it's that fast, what difference does it make? It's personal preference. And make sure that you're animating from 0, 0, just so that you always know where to end up at the end. So, okay, I'm ending back at 0, 0. There is something called root animation where you don't end at 0 because instead of translating the character, they call it foot sliding. If you have a walking character and the programmer is playing the animation you made and just making it move forward, then you get what's called foot slide because the programmer can't ever quite match whatever animation of walk cycle you set. So then the animator has the option of doing root animation where they actually move the root as the steps go forward, and then the programmer just tells it to play the animation and the character moves forward on its own. That's definitely an option for some games. For QB jump, it might be a little overkill, so I'm just I'm not too concerned about that, and I don't imagine that I'll be moving all that much. But maybe when I'm sliding, I could have a cool like clunk clunk like rotatey. Maybe he's rotating to the left and right, like in Mario, those big cubes that you little dust cloud. Maybe I'll do that. Anyway, so I've keyframed my animation for idle or for jump, and for idle, maybe I'll do. I'll click on this. I'll pop over to my project. Let's double click it. Let's give him a little animation for his default. I do need to test that this still works and everything, but you know, I'm working on it. I'm clicking on the player cube root because that's the one that has the animator on it. So now I can keyframe properly and all my stuff appears. I'm going to add a keyframe at the beginning and the end. Add key. And I'm doing 0 to 1. I don't know actually what I want. Add key. Is that just a second? I bet it's just a second. 1 1000. 1 1000. Yeah. I don't know how long should a idle animation be. 1 month. Maybe a minute and a half, or minute, maybe a second and a half. I'm gonna go to second and a half. Boom. And now I can do whatever I want in between. I don't know what's he gonna do. He could just kind of squashy, stretchy. I could see that working. So let's take my scale, add key. Oh, excuse me. Excuse me. I don't want to be animating the player cube root. I want to be animating the cube. Because then, because I'm animating the cube to go up. Like this. Instead of animating this to go up. Because that's, that way it's easier to control the movement separate from the jumping. Because if you do everything at the same time, then the math gets annoying. And I don't like things that require work. So I'm actually going to be animating the cube, not the cube root. But the cube is inside the cube root, so when I add my keyframes and stuff, it's all within this animator. Okay, so let's add a keyframe of scale and position there. And, you know, I feel like I could probably get away with a second, so I'm just going to do a second. If I had some bone structure, I'd make him bob like this. But I don't have it. So instead, I'm just going to make it do a little bob like that. Little bob. No hoop, buzzer, no three-eyed frog, just a canine feline little cat dog. So add key and add key in the middle. Oh, I actually did pretty good. It's pretty close to the bottom there. If I really want it to be perfect, you can hit the, there's a side view, X, and then changing it to orthographic style just by clicking on the little square part. And so now I can make sure that it's like perfect, always grounded. I don't like things sliding through ground, so I always try to pay attention to it. I might go a little faster. I'm not sure. I'm not a super huge fan of the slowness. So maybe I'll bring this to 20 and this to 40. That feels pretty good. A little short idle animation. Let's pop back over to player cube, make sure everything's cool. I'm just going to press play. I should see it just playing its idle animation. Oh, it's not set to loop. Okay. So I click on idle, and I click on anim idle. There you are. Loop time. Boom. I want you to loop. Right. Cool. Anim jump should not be a loop, so let's click on anim jump here. You are not a loop. That is correct. And let's press play and see what happens. Okay, he's doing his little poppy. I'm gonna tap. Oh, and it just works. Cool. You know, I don't like that animation as much anymore. The jump. I feel like it's less cute. Something's off. Oh, it's because it's blending. It's blending with the idle. So some of the squishies is kind of carrying over. I'm not sure how I feel about it. I'm not going to worry about it too much. Okay, so then, now that I have that, how do we do the slide? Okay. The slide is done. I'm going to pop over to the touch controller, which is called has an object called player movement in it, which receives touch. I don't know why I named it player movement. I guess because it moves the player, but why did I name the parent object touch controller? So not only do we do this should jump stuff, we also have horizontal movement behavior. And just so that everybody can like pause the screen and look at all the code or whatever, I'm just gonna scroll down. Here's the full code set. I'm just gonna go to, come on, there-ish. I'll stop for a moment. You can pause. And then I'll scroll down a bit more. I'll stop a moment so you can watch. Maybe pause it here, and if any of these are useful to have. But okay, so the horizontal movement behavior, I need the tilt of the phone. And that's basically it. So the tilt of the phone, I just need to know, am I tilting left or am I tilting right? So to get that, I have kind of like what we saw with cat-like coding. I have an acceleration, I have a position, so my character has a current position. I have an acceleration based on how much I'm tilting my controller. Excuse me. And then I have a desired displacement, which is my current position plus the acceleration times delta time, which is just how you scale things movement by the frame rate of the game to make things feel nicer. And then I add that to the player's position to get where I want to be. At that point, I don't do it here, but I could decide, is that within the bounds of where I'm allowed to be? And if it isn't, then I could do something like make sure that he's not moving past the screen. And then I set my player's position to being at the position from the math. So take the current acceleration from the tilt, which is called input.acceleration. Input.acceleration is just like how input.touches gets all the touches on a phone, input.acceleration gets the readings from the gyroscope. Current position is then my position. So now now that I know where I am and how much the player's tilting their phone, I can start thinking about how much I want to move the character by. So okay, displacement is equal to whatever this tilt was multiplied by a scaling factor like delta time, and then I was lazy and I just added times 2f to make it feel a little faster. Do I actually use speed? I don't use speed. That's why I have that arbitrary number there. So boom. So current acceleration. So how much am I going to move my character by? I'm going to move my character by the tilt amount multiplied by delta time, which is just scaling it by the frame rate of the game, multiplied by speed. So whatever that speed is, if we want to be faster, if we want it to be slower, we have the control now. Then I zero out the Z and Y displacements because I only care about left-right movement. I don't care about this, and I don't care about, I think it's this would be the other rotation. I don't care about any of those. Do you see my I don't care about this. I don't care about this. I only care about this. So I zero out the other two, and then I add that new displacement to my old position. Next position is equal to, I could technically use current position like this because I already got it once. Otherwise, do I use it anywhere else? No, I don't. All right, so I can use my next position is equal to my current position plus the desired displacement. And then I set my character's position, which is this public player transform up here, which we dragged in. I'll show it in a bit. I set it to being that next position. Right here, I could add some clamping to the next position in case it's out of bounds, etc., etc. If I wanted to, I could do it right in there. I'm not too concerned about it at the moment, though. So we've animated our character. We've created some basic animation flow using a trigger, not a boolean or a float or an int. Though you can use whatever you want if it makes sense to you. And yeah, now when we press play, we can move our character left and right. Boom and boom. Oh. If you go, I guess, far enough, then it starts thinking that it's tilting the other way. And I tap and he jumps. So let's talk about how to do some other things. What time are we at? 30 minutes. Okay, so I'll talk a little bit more and then I'll take a break and then I'll make another video about maybe how to do some more stuff. So it's easier to segment. We can either pause the game when I've paused it so that the player can't move their character, or what else would we want to do? Or we make it so that we can play it in game, like this, so that I can more easily test it. Let's do that. So let's say we want to test the game in editor without having to always test on our device. If I were to go to my touch controller, player movement, 1,000 different ways we can do this, but I want to test. So we have horizontal movement and we have the tap to jump. I'll start with the tap to jump. We can use something that protects code from running when it should or shouldn't. I believe they're called processor directives. So that this code will only run if we're in editor. Boom, Unity editor. I could even say Unity editor win. And basically what happens is I can type if Unity editor else and if. So you'll notice that when I did that, it grayed out all this code. I know some of you are having weird C# stuff or Visual Studio stuff where like you're not getting the colors, but it should gray this section out because it knows that it's currently in the Unity editor. I haven't built it out. But the more I think about it, so I'll go through this so that you know what it is. This is a quick way to make sure that code only runs if it's built for a certain thing. So if I'm in Unity editor, do this, otherwise do something on the phone. But now that I think about it, if I'm connected to Unity Remote, you know, I'd like to be able to do it, even if I'm in the editor. So let me just check. Do I have a remote option? I don't. I was just going through the preprocessor directive. I typed remote. I don't see anything. So I'm going to assume that means that I can't make a platform dependency on having Unity Remote active. So I could say I need to return true if the player hits their keyboard or hits their mouse. So I'm going to say if input.get mouse button down, and I think I say which mouse button, 0 is the left mouse, then return true. You don't technically need these curly brackets for an if statement that only has one line, but I will add it. So now, when I'm playing, I can tap with my, as you hear me, I'm clicking my mouse and it's going. But now that I think about it, you know, when it's going to my Unity remote, this is normally what I do because I don't usually use Unity remote. But since I am kind of thinking about how I want to do this, we could do 2 if statements just in a row, because we don't have a game manager yet that I can have like some fancy settings on. If I felt a mouse button down, then do something else. Else, if touches occurs, do something. But I want to prioritize the touches over the mouse. And I believe that Unity does have a fallback where I believe that Unity treats the first touch. I'm just doing this as a test because I suspect it's still true. It used to be true. I believe Unity treats a touch as a mouse button down if there's only one finger. So let's find out. Don't crash. Come on. Yes, it still treats, technically Unity treats a mouse button down as also a touch, which is weird. But if you want to add effects or something for where the touch was, I think this is a little better. It lets you have more information. So I'll keep it as like this so that I can test both in editor and in Unity remote. And then eventually it'll just work when I build it to my phone because I have both settings set up. If I was building to my phone and I wasn't using Unity editor ever, I would have those if Unity Windows and like and then do all that fancy stuff that I showed before. But you know, since I was thinking about it as I was going through it, Unity remote makes this a bit weird because it is the editor still. It's not really built. Okay, so we've got that, and then how do we fake the acceleration? The acceleration I could set to input.acceleration, and then I could, I'm just thinking about this, because again, normally I would do equals, and then I would have one setup if Unity editor, elif, and then that means that, or else, excuse me, and if, boom. So if I'm in Unity editor, I'd read keyboard strokes or something. Otherwise, I'd look for the acceleration, and I'd do some stuff in here. But since I'm using the Unity remote, it's going to be a little different. I'll do equals input.acceleration, and then vector2 alternate current acceleration equals input.axis horizontal. And it's actually not a vector2, it's going to be a float, because as you saw with the cat-like coding last week, a get axis will return -1 if I'm holding on the left and a 1 if I'm holding on the right. So we have it working with the phone, and now I'm just adding functionality so that I can test it on PC as well, just to keep the clarity here for why I'm doing this. Alternate horizontal, and I'll say I'm just thinking about the best way to do this. If math.abs. Let's think about it like this. If I was ever pressing something on a keyboard, that would probably mean that I'm trying to test on PC, right? So I was about to do some math to say, like, if one is greater than the other, then use the one that's greater. But why would I need to if I can already just check, am I hitting something on the keyboard? So if alternate horizontal is not equal to 0f, that means that I'm trying to use it during the play mode. So if that's the case, then instead, current acceleration is not going to be equal to input.acceleration. It's going to be equal to a new vector 2 that I'm making up right now. And I need two numbers for an x and a y. I already know that the... I think it's what do I zero out? Okay, I want x. I don't want y. Okay. So I want x. So if alternate horizontal, in other words, if the player is using their keyboard, I'm just going to use it. Alternate horizontal. I'll rename this just to make it clear. Keyboard horizontal. Then I'm just going to change my current acceleration to being whatever that keyboard horizontal is. And then everything else is the same, because I'm using all the same variables. Boom. So let's see if it works. Maybe it will. This is just giving you guys the option so that if you want to test on your PC, so you don't have to build it out to your phone or use Unity remote over and over, because like as you saw last week, I did get a new cable, but like a crappy cable can make testing annoying, all that stuff. So let's click on this. I'm holding right. Hey, I'm holding left. Hey, you quit that. What's happening? Let me try that again. Where'd he go? Cubey boy. Huh? Holding left. Holding right. Holding left. Oh, that's me clicking on the screen, by the way, when he jumps. Okay, so something's off. Something's off. I wonder if it's just a small enough number. So let's debug log this. Let's test out. What I suspect is my speed isn't enough. So after we have this, let's debug.log current acceleration. I'll just say tilt acceleration equals plus current acceleration. So just output whatever that is. And I like to do these just to make it easier to read. And keyboard acceleration is, and I want to do keyboard horizontal. So now I'm going to pop back over here. I'm going to open up my console, and let's see what's going on. Oh, I want to delete this debug log just so I don't spam myself too much. I just deleted the line. I double-clicked that and it jumped me to here. I just slashed it out. You could delete it if you already copied that line. Okay. So they're both 0 at the moment. It is -1, +1. Oh, my rotation. I'm holding left and right, and it's not. Oh, is it A and D? Oh, it's staying at 0. Interesting. Okay, so what did I do wrong? Let's find out. But I stopped. Good. Input.get axis horizontal. Input dot. Pretty sure it's get axis, right? Get axis horizontal. It feels right. Keyboard horizontal. Let's check if my inputs are set up properly. So file, edit, project settings, input manager, horizontal. Oh, it's set up. Hum. Why would that be? Let's just get it directly. Input.getAxis horizontal. Debug.log. Input. Did I spell it wrong? I might have spelled it wrong. Who knows? I'm just hitting clear. Let's check that again. I just want to double check. Okay, horizontal. That's how it's spelled. Horizontal. Horizontal. Close. Okay. Okay. Oh, it's going up. Oh, and it's staying at 1. Is something bugging out? Oh, wait. Oh, it's reading the phone. Wait, is it? No, that's get axis horizontal. What if... I'm just curious if there's something that a phone has. Holding 0 here. Let's collapse. Sort of curious if there's something wrong with my keyboard. Does this all make sense? Come on. Let me try disconnecting my phone, see if that is making something weird happen. Oh, okay. So when the phone is connected, it's passing along information. And Unity, I assume, is trying to get horizontal readings from it. Okay, that's weird. Why that would be, I'd have to research to see if there is a horizontal axis in the inputs of a Unity iPhone version. So like just how I could get the touches from it and get the rotation from it. Maybe there's some input that would translate to horizontal and that was overriding the input horizontal of my keyboard. That's interesting. I'm not sure what that would mean. But when I disconnected my phone, that just let me test it. And I guess in my scenario, if I already had my phone connected, then it wouldn't have been a problem to just test on the phone. So it didn't really hurt anything. Okay, so that was my problem. Is I was connected to my phone while I was trying to test just without the phone. And really, this is just for ease, just to make your life easier, so you don't have to always build or like have Unity Remote working, because sometimes it doesn't. I'm just gonna remove that debug log, clean up so I don't have like all the spam. And next part of this lab, I'll talk a little bit about why we use delta times, because you'll notice that I can move, scaling everything by the passage of game time means that when I want to pause the game, I can. Since I know when this menu is open, I can set time scale to 0, and then anything that's using delta time will then be multiplying by 0 and won't move anymore. So that'll be nice. Let me just double check. How easy did I make that? I know when my panels are open. And the menu controller doesn't do much yet, but now he can. And now in the next half of the lab, we'll make a little game manager. The game manager will know when menus are open or when the player's doing stuff, and we'll be able to manage the scene based on that. Anyway, I hope this was educational. Sorry for the bit of a dragged out conclusion due to your professor's mild incompetence about leaving things plugged in when they shouldn't be. But yeah, we'll get there. Oh, where is OBS? There you are. Well, thanks so much. I'll talk to y'all later. Email me with any questions or difficulties always, of course.